welcome friends to our Sunday meeting. The ULT meets all over the world, including in different cities in the United States on Sundays. Ours is at 11 a.m. every Sunday. We meet for the discussion of a particular topic presented by a student, and sometimes it takes the form of a roundtable. On the first and the third Sundays, we're studying Mr. Wadia's book, Living the Life. The modern theosophical movement was brought out in force in the 19th century, and the ULT remains faithful to the founders of the theosophical movement, realizing that the messenger, and those who gave it out into the world constitute one line of current that presents this wisdom religion to the public at intermittent periods all through the historical era, as well as way before it, thousands of years before it. So the policy of this lodge then is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy, and it does not profess attachment to any theosophical organization. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. And that work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy, and the exemplification of those principles in practice. As we live our lives, we become exemplars of that philosophy. And this enables each practitioner to realize the self and to come to a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. The ULT has no constitution, bylaws, nor officers. The students are bound together by similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to disseminate this philosophy and help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from The Voice of the Silence. These instructions are for those ignorant of the dangers of the lower ED. ED is synonym of CD, and that refers to the psychic faculties in men as well as in nature. He who would hear the voice of nada, the soundless sound, or voice in the spiritual sound, and comprehend it, he has to learn the nature of dharana. Dharana is perfect concentration. Having become indifferent to objects of perception, the pupil must seek out the Raja of the senses, the thought producer, he who awakes illusion. The mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciple slay the slayer. For when to himself his form appears unreal, as do on waking all the forms he sees in dreams, when he has ceased to hear the many, he may discern the one, the inner sound, which kills the outer. Only then, not till then, shall he forsake the region of Asat, the false, to come unto the realm of Sat, the true. Before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained, and fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. Before the soul can hear the image, man has to become as deaf to roarings as to whispers, to cries of bellowing elephants as to the silvery buzzing of the golden firefly. Before the soul can comprehend and may remember, she must unto the silent speaker be united, just as the form to which the clay is modeled is first united with the potter's mind. For then the soul will hear and will remember, and then to the inner ear will speak the voice of the silence. And now today's talk, Ancient Wisdom in Modern Times.
Friends, my glasses on, so I can see. To paraphrase Krishna in the Bhavagad-Gita, it states that how he's speaking to Arjuna, and he speaks about this wisdom and how this wisdom has been lost throughout the various ages, and it was taught to various sages throughout the years. And if you consider Krishna as an embodiment of that wisdom, and he states further that he incarnates from time to time for the destruction of the wicked and the restoration of the just. And in the Bible, I believe it's Ecclesiastes 1:1, where it states that there's nothing new under the sun. So when we say ancient wisdom in modern times, basically we're talking about the theosophical movement itself, and how in time it goes, it may become eclipsed, and then there are times when it reemerges, as the first speaker stated. What the attempt to do today is to, first of all, define, well, modern times. Some scholars may say the modern times would start roughly around 1860. So prior to that would be the Middle Ages, and then you have the ancient and prehistoric ages. So what wisdom that we speak of that was in the ancient world? Well, briefly, from India we have philosophy, the science of yoga and meditation. From Egypt you have the architecture, the building of the pyramids, mathematics. China, again, you have Lao Tse, the Tao, and I Ching, philosophy again. Out of Greece we have Pythagoras, Plato, mathematics, philosophy again, the Pythagorean theorem, and then we have the all initiates, and then we have Thales, Anaximenes, Heraclitus, all initiates. And the debt that we owe to them is that they presented the first principle not as a personal being, but how Thales speaks about water being the first principle, Anaximenes speaks about air, and Heraclitus comes forth with the idea of fire. So here again, it's this idea of no personal being, but deity itself that they represent. And from the literature of that period, Aeschylus, another initiate, he brings forth Prometheus Bound, which is read in modern times to mostly average college student in literature classes heard of Prometheus. We will speak a little about that a little later. So we see that these examples of the ancient wisdom have re-emerged in modern times, maybe in a different cloak, let's say old wine and new bottles, but yet it's still the ancient wisdom that has surfaced again. Let's see here now. To start out with the idea of the modern times as well as the ancient wisdom, I want to read something basically. It says here, the study and interpretation of myths, fables, folk tales, folklore, traditions form one aspect of the third object of the ULT, and that is the comparative study of literature, etc. On the other hand, we're told that it is our duty to oppose superstition, miracle, and what's called supernatural. All right. Now, to comprehend the whole idea of myths, it states here that the whole subject, we must recognize that myths convey cosmic and anthropological facts, just as fables convey truth about the social behavior of men and women. Similarly, fairy tales reveal one aspect of the human subconscious, the psychic nature of every man. Okay? Now, the particular myth that I mentioned, Aeschylus, for those who may not be familiar with the idea of Prometheus, Prometheus takes the fire from heaven and brings the fire down to mankind. Now, that's very symbolic. Fire, it is symbolic of one of the most, to read, basically, to get the idea, to give the student the full idea of ancient landmarks here. And all that's being presented is from our literature within the lodge here. But it states here that it is the most ancient of allegories, the grandest of all myths, okay? Being concerned with what is probably the most important event which has ever taken place on this planet. That which Theosophy describes as lining up of manas, or the lining up of mind. And that process, we don't want to go all into detail about that process, but it states here how important the giving of mind to the forms, way back in the third race, etc. And so you can see there how it stated earlier that myths are concerned with the history of the races, former races of mankind. Says the history of early races of humanity and former continents, their civilization and their cataclysmic changes, the deeply occult truths as to man's evolution and final goal, the secrets of nature, scientific law, moral verities, the profound religion of our forefathers, all these are contained in what we call myths, fairy tales, fables as such. Okay? But it was interesting, one of the moderns, he was very well known in academic circles, Max Muller, who did a lot of work in this area. But funny, he states that myths is disease of language. He's one of these moderns who just looked at it literally and couldn't penetrate the deeper occult truths hidden within the myths. And we all know from study of theosophy how when the initiates present things to the masses of the people on the external level, it's done in enigmatic forms. And even Maimonides states that whenever you find one of a story which seems utterly ridiculous, be warned or be forewarned that within that is definitely a grain of truth, okay, not to be overlooked. Now, what the attempt today is to do in terms of, in this book, The Ocean of Theosophy here, the ancient wisdom as presented by Mr. Judge and others, what this student did was just outline some of the chapters. And the first chapter is Theosophy and the Masters, General Principles, Septenary Constitution of Man, Earth Chain, we're not getting into that, but body and astral body, karma, stuff like that. So, starting out with the very first chapter in Ocean of Theosophy, Mr. Judge brings forth this idea of Mahatma. And he says, in that one word alone is embodied so much philosophy. As Nadine said earlier today in speaking to Toon-John, she says, oh, you're perfect. In that word Mahatma resonates the total realization of that word perfection. Okay. Also within that word Mahatma, you have brotherhood. And speaking of brotherhood, just this week we honored Martin Luther King, and he was one of the exponents of universal brotherhood as well. And what that word Mahatma signifies also is the idea of teacher. And we can see this idea of teacher in the Guru Rapara chain, I believe I pronounced the word right. And from the higher avatars all the way down to the teacher in the classroom, is the idea of instruction, which was again mentioned in the Voice of Silence reading again. And also sacrifice comes forth because these individuals have sacrificed themselves, time and effort to represent these teachings found in this ancient wisdom. And an idea of sacrifice we can see, especially the non-attachment to the action, we can see that in modern stories as the Lone Ranger and Zorro, individuals who mask their personal identity. They're not looking for recognition. They do what needs to be done to help those in need of assistance, and they disappear. So we can see again, we have streamlets of examples of this wisdom coming forth in, well, film, art, literature, dance, and this attempt today is to do such that, because in, again, this Theosophy book here, it states modern theosophy. Modern theosophy has influenced literature, art, music, and film, sculpture, architecture. And so the idea, once again, is to present, is to look around the world and see, in fact, how this has happened. But moving along again with the idea of the masters, also it presents the idea of initiation, because to become a part of that circle, one has to be worthy of that. And we can see that coming down even today in colleges. You have the idea of pledging. That's similar to being initiated. So we do have streamlets of this ancient wisdom, however modified today in today's world. Example. And in chapter 2, under general principles, Mr. Judge presents the idea of law. Okay? And the idea there that law is on every plane and every being is subjected to the law. There's no one above the law. This is a universe of law, whereas years ago, some moderns may have thought that everything was fortuitous. There was accident, chance, or luck, which is is similar to luck and miracle, things like that. Mr. Judge presents again, this is a universal law, and we can see how law today, no one gets away with anything. So one may think on a more physical level that you can evade man's law, but then there's universal law, which we know as karma, and karma works in very mysterious ways, once again. And then the idea of septenary, everything is sevenfold, which presents itself in the literature, and we can see how that comes today as we have 7 virtues, 7 days of the week, everything is in sevens. That's easily recognizable. And so we come to, he presents the idea of the astral body, and we have that, and today we're talking about out-of-body experiences. We talk about the astral traveling, and this student came up with the idea of how the internet, if the astral light contains everything that man has thought, thinking, and will think, the internet is, in a sense, when they say it's all on the internet, it's a stretch, but just envision the internet as like a concretized or materialization of the astral, because they say everything's there. They put all the information that you want, and if the astral light is a repository of information, so it's global, it's around the world, and it's there. So that's a stretch. But then manas, the idea of mind, and how mind was lighted up, as mentioned before, and how mind, this individual mind, comes from universal mind. And manas is a god. And we have this film that's out now, Lucy, where she states, well, this woman, she uses just 10% of her brain, but then of her mind, and then some kind of way, I haven't even seen the movie itself, but she's to the point where she uses 100% of her mind, and as a result of that, she's doing incredible things that are just impossible and crazy that we may think of the average person walking around here today. Also, in Rodin, his sculpture called The Thinker, we've probably seen that. The guy sits down for thinking. Well, people are gradually, or the modern world is coming to, under the title of mind, we're coming to that point where we're understanding that the think and thoughts are things, thoughts are powers. Buddha said we're made of thoughts. Where is that quote? We are made of thoughts built at thoughts build as we think. We're built of thoughts, in other words, and we're constantly building ourselves through thought. So it's this idea that this guy did a sculpture, and he's called a thinker. And one of the movies about Buddha after becoming enlightened, or it's a movie called Little Buddha. I think Keanu Reeves played that, I think. And he went to look for some work. And the employee said, well, what can you do? And Buddha said, I can think. And that's the notion here that it's all about what you think. And as the first student read, it comes from the mind, and the mind is the great slayer of the real. So we see how that, again, the ancient wisdom has always been there, and it's a matter of us moderns to see that. And reincarnation, that's, again, presented in the ancient wisdom. Reincarnation and karma go together. They got movies. They have movies out. The Reincarnation of Peter Proud. Erykah Badu is saying, "See you next lifetime." Tina Marie is saying, "I've been here before." So we do have in that area of music, just little streamlets of echoes of this doctrine coming forth. And then on the TV, which we've probably looked at, we have the idea of karma, and you hear where they say credit karma. So we see how it states here. It says Theosophy is influencing the world. The idea of karma, dharma, yoga, nirvana, Bhavagad-Gita, Mahatma are terms that are generally seeping into the public consciousness. And theosophical doctrines like reincarnation, the law of justice, universal spirit, astral body, astral light, universal evolution, the moral universe, the invisible universe, consciousness and intelligence residing in all forms other than man. You know, civilization, cycles of civilization, right? And then we have, it states here that these particular movements, like the ecological movement, etc., have influenced, at some time were influenced by theosophical ideas, this natural, this new age of back to nature, Mother Earth, things like that. At some point, you can always go back to its point of origin, and you'll find somewhere down the line theosophical influence. Like HBB was, there was a former student here who said HBB was the, what would they say, mother hippie? She was the mother of all hippies, something like that. And the new age, in other words, you know, from the ancient age to the modern age, even though we're still in a dark age, but all comes back down to HPB, the messenger again, and this new influx of this wisdom coming forth. And then he speaks of, in the ocean, the psychic world. And we have today, in the form of Edgar Cayce, considered the genuine psychic. We have telepathy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, Carillion photography, which brings out the astral body of plants and things that are animate as well as inanimate. So it's there. Noted personalities that have been influenced by theosophy. It says that Albert Einstein kept a copy of the secret doctrine on his desk. Thomas Edison, the inventor. Then there was a Professor Crookes, heavyweight. He was one of the first to start investigating the astral world. Rudolf Steiner, founder of anthroposophy. And we have W.B. Yeats and George Russell, poet and writer of Ireland. Then you have D.H. Lawrence, T.S. Eliot, William Miller, T.D. Suzuki. He was one of the first to start bringing forth Buddhism in the modern world. So that's just a brief outline. But we want to look at, once again, I said, in music today, we had a group in popular music. We had Earth, Wind, and Fire, one of their albums that came out in the 60s. They were talking about astrology, mysticism, inner self, outer self. And then we have in schools today, people are reading the Arabian Nights, tales of genies, magic, and carpet rides, and things like that. We have William Shakespeare. And who hasn't at some point in time read some Shakespeare or seen one of his plays? And this is what Madame Blavatsky In the first volume of Lucifer, she states that Shakespeare's deep and accurate science and mental philosophy has proved more beneficent to the true philosopher in the study of the human heart, therefore in the promotion of truth, than the more accurate but certainly less deep men of the Royal Academy. Again, we know from her letter to A.P. Sinnett that she wanted a student to write, quote, the esoteric meaning of some of Shakespeare's plays for an inclusion in the secret doctrine. And lastly, we have Mr. Judge stating, the adepts assert that Shakespeare was unconsciously to himself inspired by one of their own number. And Shakespeare's plays, Macbeth, deals with witchcraft, which is a fact. Othello, Hypnotized, The Tempest, a mystery play, and we can go on and on in Hamlet, Psychologized, Hypnotized, things like all this is brought forth. And we have the literature, Zanoni, which is for those who are further interested in deeper studies of the mystery of the occult world. And then in some of the modern day movies, we have Star Wars, again, in the idea of Yoda being the teacher, and Harry Potter. Here's Dumbledore, again, the Mahatma or the ancient one passing on this wisdom. The Hobbits, wizardry. We have movies like the Avatar, some of us may have seen. Okay. Now I want to go further into the idea of art, philosophy, dance, literature, architect, and then some of us may have heard of Marcus Vitruvius Polio in architecture. He was an initiate, and we can see he is known in his 10 books for law of proportion, and architecture is built on mathematics and geometry and all that, and any student in any modern school of architecture or professional architecture definitely has to resort to, again, this initiate from the ancient world. He was in the Augustan age, okay? I have here just a few examples of how theosophy has worked its way into the modern world. Now, theosophy promotes meditation, of course. So here is an example how meditation has creeped into the modern world. It's a film called The Dahmer Brothers, an inspiring documentary film about the introduction of meditation into an American high-security prison in the state of Alabama. The film chronicles the experience of the inmates. A 10-day meditation workshop was originally restricted to hardened criminals serving life sentences, but when for many it turned out to be a transformative experience, it was expanded to include other prisoners. Okay, research in this direction has shown that meditation is beneficial and has led to improved physical and psychological well-being, a decrease in anger, stress, and an increase in emotional intelligence, and a 20% reduced rate of institutional infractions. That's in the field of meditation. Again, coming back to the ancient world. And then we have here in the world of dance, ballet, Kim. This is a metaphor in ballet. Another sort of metaphor certainly deserves mention. An article in the Portuguese newsletter, whatever the title is, calls attention to the art of ballet being performed by dancers with special gifts of their own. And this particular Spanish dancer put a group together of young, severely handicapped dancers who break with the traditional aesthetic of ballet. They use the art of ballet as a metaphor to exert carefully the culture, that culture belongs to everyone. And speaks further about how even though these kids are handicapped and moving their bodies, but through the art of ballet, they got into the idea of the aesthetic, and it brings it out. So, again, in a theosophical book. And here, number 4, intelligent. And here in this particular theosophical book, this is a doctor, a lady right here, picture, and she's involved. It says here, this lady here, she is Antonia and some Indian name, PhD and co-founder of Overground Arts, which began in Switzerland, and she is currently based in Brooklyn, New York, but she's a student of theosophy and other theosophical-based traditions, and this is entitled Theosophy and Contemporary Thought, Yoga and World Peace, again with the idea of yoga to show the various forms how people are using it, and she is a theosophical student. Here we have well, let's start with mystical painters. Mystical painters, 39, 38. Well, Kandinsky, Gauguin, Picasso, William Blake, and other painters, Da Vinci, Mona Lisa, and especially Van Gogh's Starry Night. We've probably heard of Starry Night, in which he uses bright yellows and blues and things like that. And all this brings forth how yellow, again, is it's a warming color, and how, well, let's see if we can find his words here without going through too much. But it's interesting. It talked about how blue, it was a blind person. This example is given in here. A blind person was brought into a room which was painted yellow, and the person opened his arms out, feeling the warmth, and whereas he was in a room painted blue, he sort of contracted his arms, and I don't know what he felt, cold, but again, it's this notion of, it's called synesthesia. Let me see. The science of colors and how colors affect individuals. And Goethe, in his work, The Theory of Color, he speaks about the eye needs light as well as color. It says, where is it, to get Mr. Goethe completely? 1 second. Let me find his, oh yeah, it says, okay, Goethe, in his Theory of Color, the eye requires color as much as it requires light. It gives great pleasure, which must be linked to its power to heal. Again, color. Wanted to show also, it was the school diary of an art teacher, and she explains this was her second grade class, and these are her students in awe of paintings right here, the wonder of art, and some of the quotations coming from her and others states how art is here. Einstein says the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. And when you come to a painting, it sort of like brings you into it. You know how they say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And things like beauty, abstract, stuff like that, music and all that, it goes deep within. How Plato said, yeah, I believe it was Plato, that the music of the spheres comes from on high, and it enters the inwardness, or it enters into the soul, the rhythm and harmony. And, well, the ballet, one more thing here. There was something about the Mona Lisa also, but I don't want to go through all that. Moving along further, in the realm of science, just to show Max Planck. Max Planck is, along with Einstein, Bohr, Schrodinger, and these heavyweights, these giants of the 19th century, to show how the world has shifted from a basic mechanical building block type of model to an abstract metaphysical universe, and how Einstein and those guys came in with quantum relativity and quantum mechanics, and how our vision has changed. And Max Planck, he's one of the linchpins in this transformation. He's considered one of these heavyweights. And this is what he says here. As a man, quote, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter. I can tell you, as a result of my research about atoms, this much. There is no such thing as matter. And here is one of the heavyweights. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force, which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute universe, this minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume that behind this force, the existence of a consciousness and intelligent mind. There again, consciousness behind form. And then, mostly and lastly, we could just name a whole host of scientists who are involved in biology and things like that that are breaking through. But I want to end with Einstein, by the way, who says the greatest defect of the Western world is the idea of the personal God. Okay? And Einstein states here, he says, a human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts, his feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. Okay, our task must be to free ourselves from this prison that we've created for ourselves. Paraphrasing here, right here, and to expand our consciousness to encompass the whole of nature. Okay, and see its beauty. And I'll end right there. So, open up for thoughts, further comments, etc. Yes?
So, you made a distinction between inanimate and animate, but I thought everything was animate.
What's your...
I can't remember.
This chair that you're sitting in, that chair is considered what? I mean, is it inanimate or what is your definition of animate?
It has movement and energy.
Okay, so are you saying? I'm trying to let you bring it out. What's your general conception of inanimate? And that's an inanimate object.
I don't think there is any.
You're basing that on why? Because are you saying that even though this appears to be still, you have energy circulating around it? All right, okay, that gets into theosophy. But for the most part, the student in biology going to freshman 101, he or she is learning that there are living things and there are non-living things.
But for us, it's theosophists.
Yes, that's...
There's no...
Well,
is
yes.
there no inanimate?
Say again?
Is there no such thing as inanimate?
Well, yes, you could say that, just like there's no such thing as dead matter. You know, they would say this is dead, you know. It came from a living tree, but once it's cut and taken to the factory and zaw, and sculptured, it's no longer living. But there's an ocean of life. There is no dead matter anywhere, okay? Yes.
Okay, another question.
Sure.
Right, so I think you said our duty is to oppose magic and the supernatural?
No, not magic. I said oppose superstition, miracle, and supernatural. There is nothing supernatural. It's all within the realm of nature.
Law.
But the question is, with magic, with the popular conception of magic, or the real magic? You know, the popular conception of magic is illusionary, right? Real magic is not.
Yes, but yes. Now the magic that appears in Harry Potter, and you know, he's wiggling wizardry, right? He can speedos, spados, and things happen, stuff like that. Hopefully, it will. And in these movies, Sinbad the Sailor and stuff like that, and the magic copyright and genies and stuff like that, hopefully that will awaken in a younger person ideas, you know, bring back that knowledge from him or her having lived years and years ago when these things were real, okay? And so being able to do little things like that, manipulate hand cards and stuff like that, that depending on the individual child or person, how deeply they want to go into it. But it's interesting that they can manipulate illusion and stuff like that, which this is an illusion. So it's a baby step towards a giant step. Yes.
How would you define magic?
How would I define magic? I would basically say ancient wisdom applied. You can apply it to, like they say occultism. It's the art of life, no, the science of life and the art of living. So magic, basic definition would be ancient wisdom and its application.
So it's the inner life expressing itself on the outer, is it not? Where does your magic come from?
Excuse me.
Since everything is under law,
Mm-hmm.
without having those inner faculties active, you would not be able to practice it, would you?
Very true. Very true. So yes, if you're under the words ancient wisdom, then you go into the idea of the without versus the within, and how student mentioned the inner. Okay, and it's that noumenal world which is controlled and understood, affecting the outer world, the without. So yes.
Theosophy is that the same thing as mysticism?
No. No, it's not. Theosophy.
Well, how do you recognize it? How would you recognize something that's theosophical?
How would one recognize something that's theosophical?
You spent time pointing out the symbols that exist today in modern society, modern times,
Mm-hmm.
that demonstrate theosophy or theosophical principles,
Mm-hmm.
notions, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
standards,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Okay. So if one was looking for knowledge
Mm-hmm.
in the realm of theosophical
Right.
or theosophy,
Got you.
then how would they
How would
begin
they-
to recognize
That.
what is and what isn't
Well.
theosophical? All right, I pose the question: Is mysticism theosophy? And you said no. Well, is the notion are theosophical notions? Can they be defined on? I mean, can theosophical notions be defined on mystical levels?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, back to the front. How can one recognize theosophical ideas? Let's say again, Martin Luther King, whose holiday we just celebrated this week. When you see one speaking of brotherhood of mankind and espousing spiritual truths, things like that in the outer world, that is an indication of speaking of one life, truth, things like that. That's one way. Now, back to the first part, is theosophy mysticism? No, theosophy is broader than mysticism. Theosophy is a complete body of knowledge, which has been handed down, as you came a little later when I referenced Krishna speaking of the Gita, how he speaks about this lost knowledge, this wisdom has been handed down from sages and ages throughout eons and eras. Okay, mysticism is a practical application of some of that knowledge. The modern mystic that you may think about, who goes off, he could be or she could be, what's that term in philosophy, existentialistic, involved in just like Buddha, for instance. On his initial search for enlightenment, he dwelt for a time with a group of mystics or hermits, okay? And they were practicing all these, things, starving their body and trying to get there. And Buddha said, no, this is not it. And he left them, and eventually he returned to them. And some of them, I think, eventually became his disciples. But in the idea of Buddha and his awakening understanding of this ancient wisdom, this universal cosmic wisdom, this ocean of knowledge, which theosophy presents and which theosophy is. So,
Well, to understand all of that,
mm-hmm.
you can't understand that. One cannot understand that on a intellectual level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to really appreciate the body of knowledge that you're talking about, the knowledge of one, the whole idea of one, the whole idea of one law, the whole idea of all things being under law, these type of, the idea of rebirth or reincarnation, the idea of karmic effects, cause and effect. These ideas, to be totally comprehended, can they not? I mean, they can't be fully comprehended from only the intellectual ideas, intellectual faculty, the mind. This is beyond that. It is more, and lack of a better term, and I don't know if this is, I'm not saying it properly, but it's more mystical. It's more beyond physical. It's definitely metaphysical, but
Right.
but the whole idea of the whole essence, rather, of these ideas.
Okay, I would say to you, yay and nay, the realization of the one life and things like that, I would say you would have to eventually go through that mystical way. But the understanding of it, there are thousands of beings, people living in India, and they are taught reincarnation and karma, which are these ideas, and they're not mystical, they're just everyday working people. And intellectually, you can understand these concepts of the universal law of everything, how we do have, and cycles and things like that. And I say further what you were saying, the realization of it comes through eventually mystical training somewhat.
But to fully understand it, we read it in the Declaration, one has to live it. The philosophy that the masters gave out to the world is intellectually understood for the purpose of its promulgation in its pure form. We found it, and as we found it, we learn it and we give it. But to really know what that means, the tenets of the philosophy, one has to live the virtues or paramitas that are listed in the voice of the silence. In other words, service to humanity has to be incorporated, that we exemplify these in our daily lives. Only then do you get to know what that means.
Right. Okay, and what I think we're building a bridge here. Okay, we've got the intellectual, like you said, and then begin living it, and then practical every day, and then once you start living it, I think you acquire a certain lifestyle which can be considered mystical to you, and you don't broadcast those things because you start changing in that your way of life, your eating habits, your way of dealing with people and things like that very quietly, and this way leads on and upward to that type of realization that we spoke of.
If I can make another comment. This is in the book that we were studying by Mr. Wadia, and he says there comes a point in a student's life and the student questions, is this the right way? Why am I doing it? And he says that we're also going to come across that, each one of us that actually accepts or is involved in understanding the philosophy and its dissemination. At first, we're very enthusiastic about it, but we will be tested. We will come across difficulties, and it is overcoming those difficulties in our practical life that leads us further on. And he says the only fault is not trying, that you try and try again and again and again, and this is how we climb the mountain, because this is not an easy path. It requires a steadfast effort and living the life every single day.
T.S. Eliot has a poem, and a line is, the only thing that's up to us is the trying. The rest is not up to us. Huh.
A thought just occurred to me, and I don't know if this is unfair to throw out, but how would you describe, or how would you define what doctrine is secret? In other words, HPB talks about the secret doctrine. She put together a publication named The Secret Doctrine. And she also alludes in The Secret Doctrine to the fact that there's a greater secret doctrine that she's trying to bring forth to this Western society.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you define what that doctrine is?
Okay. One way of, in what you just stated there, you said publication, okay? Public. And one of the ways of transmission of wisdom was from lip to ear. And it wasn't in public. So, it's on many levels. It's just like you won't allow a child to play with matches because he's ill-equipped to handle that. So therefore you keep it away from him. So this knowledge involving laws, forces, and powers in nature are so potent and powerful that through analogy it's kept away from those who are ill-prepared to handle it. So a cloak or a veil is placed around that knowledge, okay? But it's not for those who are worthy of it and who can handle it and are ready for it, its acceptance. So that's the levels of secrecy that's involved in this knowledge, okay? Now, when she comes forward with the secret doctrine, the book itself is no longer secret because it is public, okay? But she alludes to, to use a word, there's an inner doctrine. And that, like I mentioned about Maimonides and the fairy tales and things like that, as just mentioned, it's those things that are in those works that's not put down on paper, and it's you get the understanding without being so repetitive.
Well, just to add to that, in that secret doctrine, there's esoteric stuff, there's secret stuff that unless you have the understanding, you're not going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that gets into what is secret.
Mm-hmm.
It's the areas that we're ignorant of. And that's our job to figure out what we're ignorant of, and it's a growth process.
Okay.
But there is another side to it, that title there, Ancient Wisdom. The ancient wisdom is its totality. And she says, just to talk about one subject would take 10, the powers of nature plus men would take 10 books, she said, and she couldn't fit it all in there. So she gave a very small amount of the doctrine. That's her own statement. So to answer the first student's question, that this wisdom is so large, she said, I'm lifting the veil or the corner of the book and I'm letting you in to have a peep at it. So, and that requires the inner faculties and their development in order to truly understand what is in that book or those books.
And while she gave only a limited amount, she gave the total framework the student understands.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to us to
Fill it in.
take it from there.
And fill it in.
Yeah, right. Connect the dots.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do that as long as we're selfish, as long as we're money oriented.
Mm-hmm.
That comes out in the cycles concept.
In recent times, this student has come to the realization that partial faithfulness, partial loyalty will not do for this philosophy. Eventually, there comes a time when you're going to give it all, as the teacher gave it, as Mr. Judge gave it, and I think that's a growth process, and one perhaps doesn't achieve it in one lifetime, but many lifetimes. Because Apollonius of Tyana entered the temple at 16, and he did not speak for 5 years. When he came out, he gave all of his property, half of his property to his brother, who had gone through his property, and the other half to the rest of his family, and walked free. So those examples are examples. It shows that as long as we're attached to material things, and we cannot kind of move away from it altogether, it will not do. There will come a time when that dedication is also going to be required of us too. But it's an inner growth process. It's not an external something that is put over us.
I want to just two things more that comes from the books quickly. This Harvard professor, if I can find it real quick, to show how times have changed, mentions, he did a survey, talks about here we go. He says this guy Ferguson, a professor of history at Harvard University, did a report in the Los Angeles Times, says about this remarkable decline of Christianity across Europe. He says there was a time when Europe was justly referred to itself as Christendom. Europeans built the continent's loveliest edifice to accommodate their acts of worship, okay, etc., etc. It said, now the Europeans are heathens. According to a Gallup poll, barely 20% of West Europeans attend churches at least once a week, compared to the 47% of North Americans and 82% of West Africans. Fewer than half of the Western Europeans say God is very important. God is a very important part of their lives, as generally given. So again, in how the world is changing, from a religious point of view. And then also, it's mentioned about Thomas Paine, and some of us who are familiar with Thomas Paine's words states about these are times that try the souls of men. Okay, revolution started. Okay, and then you have during the 60s who come up with the quote unquote the Black Revolution, or the revolutionary period of time, and the idea of soul comes out, and then soul brother, and this is just not necessarily it, but pain and suffering brings out things in people, okay, and it's this recognition of soul by these people who came forth with that, and then the idea of brother. Soul, generally speaking, is it's a relic. You may hear about it in churches somewhat, but Theosophy presents the fact that we are souls. So how do we move from Thomas Paine, who these are times that tried men's souls, to seeing soul, all men as soul brothers or brothers of soul, to actually becoming one of the great souls? That is the journey in that the Theosophical movement is still ongoing, bringing out that idea of, again, modern things that are coming up that reflects this inner wisdom of soul.
Well, how can you deal with that notion of soul consciousness when you reject the notion of God? you said earlier that this idea of God or personal God is not is rejected in theosophy.
Well,
but yet you mentioned this idea of soul, which seems to suggest that if we're souls, then there must be a supreme soul.
Yeah,
he knows that. He has still those trick questions he's coming up with.
Anthropomorphic idea.
Yeah, he's.
The whole idea.
I just want to
keep it going.
Well, I don't want us to have contradiction in terms.
Okay, but it's not.
What does God mean? That's the whole reason why you.
Sometimes terms bring about a misunderstanding.
True.
So my questions are just for clarification purposes.
Right. That's why I said I knew what you were doing.
Okay.
now what Herb just asked you, what is God? You see, and there again is where they diverge. Whereas once the Theosophical movement and this idea of God was similar, but that divergence occurred centuries and centuries. You know, when personalities and authorities come into place. Now, if you just substitute the word God for law and deity, universal principles, and then you can see from that how soul would flow from that, okay? Meaning from that one principle, which is within all, then the development and growth of that individuality, that ego, is that soul, that basically soul is experience, you know, something like that, okay? So that's how they blend theosophically. But the anthropomorphized stuff of God and all that, the
That
people...
was rejected.
Yes, in Theosophy. In Theosophy.
Right.
But to a person who's still within the box of Christendom or organized religion, they see God as a creator of every soul that comes in is a new soul. And so the absurdity of that, this brand new soul that's not been here before is born blind or handicapped and crippled. So what is this for? The glory of God? Or is God playing, like Einstein said, is God playing dice with the universe? You've never been here before and you're given all these opportunities. Some kid can speak 3 and 4 languages. Mozart blessed with all these gifts and stuff like that. Where's the law of reincarnation, the consistency, and then being made? You see, in the universe, it's not being made. It's an unfolding, a growth from within.
Einstein did that as a statement too. He said God doesn't play dice with the universe.
Yes. Tunja, Brown.
But with the anthropomorphic theory, there is fear of death, because that theory that you're here just one time and then for the rest of it you're either in hell or heaven is a very scary notion for people. A lot of people do not even want to think or deal with it until they're in their deathbed. And here's the next part, that if you are going to redeem yourself, then you better establish your alliance with the Christ, which is also carnalized and humanized, which is the worst thing we can do to that Christ principle. And we're going to read salvation through another personage. Where is the law in that? Where is the law? If the Christian religion would come out and establish that they made an error and correct it, then humanity can, all of it, move in the right direction. But philosophically speaking, Theosophy cannot be forced upon anyone because it's an internal process that enables you to understand it. But the point is, where is perfectibility in that anthropomorphic law? It takes the responsibility away from each individual and puts it on an external force. There is no such thing in nature.
Yeah. And in that, that's the last word. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of the day.